I don't want to get too contrarian, but Avatar: The Last Airbender is a rather good show. Regretfully late to the punch, I only got around to watching it after it dropped on Netflix. While created to be watched an episode at a time by children just coming home from school, I believe Avatar fits into the mold of binge-watching rather well. Actually, I think it fits better. Character arcs with specific chronology take place over the course of a season. In isolation, most episodes only nudge these arcs forward or plant seeds of setup one at a time. Avatar's episodes playing into one another so well is wonderful, but presents a difficulty in selecting one that is so far above the others it deserves to be called the best. But it's not impossible. Talk to fans of the show long enough and you'll hear ones that naturally rise to the top of popularity. So, what do I think is the best episode? It's not Sozin's Comet, it's not Boiling Rock, it's not Ember Island Players, Zuko Alone, the Southern Raiders, or even the Tales of Ba Sing Se, which is to say the Tale of Iroh. It's Bitter Work, a humble little episode about Toph teaching Aang to earthbend. I think Bitter Work not only represents what I love most about Avatar's storytelling, but its capacity to teach as well. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Bitter Work is a training episode centered around the parallel narrative of Aang and Zuko gaining a greater understanding of the elements. Toph begins teaching Aang how to earthbend, and although he is excited, Aang can't get into the proper headspace to do it right. It's not until standing his ground against a charging animal does he understand the way he has to approach this new style of combat. Meanwhile, Iroh prepares Zuko for when they once again inevitably encounter Azula. Initially trying to teach him how to lightning bend, Iroh switches to teaching him how to redirect it when that doesn't work out. Although he doesn't really get to test it, because the episode ends with Zuko on top of a mesa during a storm, hoping lightning will strike him to no avail.
Is this what you want? Come on, strike me down, Zeus. You don't have the ball.
As is the case with most episodes of Avatar, there's plenty to love about Bitter Work. And by that I mean stuff that's ancillary when discussing what elevates it to the best episode. It's the first episode purely dedicated to building Toph's character. We got traces of that in The Chase. Her chat with Iroh truly did wonders for her, but it was vying for attention with a lot of other stuff. Bitter Work was a great way to formally introduce her as a member of Team Avatar. The primary way we learn about her being how she teaches Aang. The first thing the episode tells us is how stubborn of an element Earth is when bending. With how obviously Aang cannot summon the resilience he needs, Toph decides prodding Aang to first demonstrate that same resilience towards her is more palatable to him. She's not being a dick to Aang because she's a dick. She's stubborn and immovable, but aims to use those traits with purpose. Cleverness and stubbornness are rarely shown as coinciding personality traits in anything, making Toph a breath of fresh air among a cast of already amazing characters. And there's other stuff like earthbending being used in more creative applications than just hurling rocks at people. Sokka's side story trying to hunt is funny. But the other best ancillary moment in Bitter Work for me is Zuko's Dark Night of the Soul. He's taught how to redirect lightning, but as he tries to test it, the episode just ends. And that really stung me, just as much as the end of Zuko Alone. Some people think that's his lowest moment, but I think it's the end of Bitter Work, because that takes away a key part of how Zuko copes with his obvious emotional duress. Until now, Zuko has always been allowed to fight back. He was beat down a lot, but as long as he could fight, even the smallest step towards regaining his honor was possible. He doesn't get to do that here, and that's the last straw. You ever notice this is the last thing that happens to him before trekking to Ba Sing Se, working at the tea shop, and taking steps towards realizing his own destiny? Yeah, funny how that works. But the real reason behind this being my favorite episode is this scene right here between Zuko and Iroh. Iroh sits him down and explains how each element and respective kingdom is upheld by tenets of ideology, characterizing them as philosophies rather than combat styles. This explains why each element needs a different martial art built around it, technically explaining the same thing as the plot with Aang and Toph from a more explicit perspective. Iroh imparts upon Zuko that combining these tenets into one person and learning from each element is just as important to the Avatar's strength as actually controlling them. This is the best scene in Avatar. This principle of philosophy enabling the elements immediately becomes such a valuable tool for character development. Just in this episode, we reaffirm Zuko and Aang as two sides of the same coin, as they both learn the same lesson. And we even have the very first sign Aang has to put his personal inclinations aside to become the Avatar. This is the main reason why Bitter Work is such an important episode for Toph. She's the only character without a dedicated arc over the whole show, which makes sense because she's an Earthbender. She's naturally solid in her convictions and already understands who she is. Usually you'd want all your characters to have growth like Zuko or Aang, but Toph is a great example of not only how to break that convention correctly, but purposefully. Character minutia aside, don't forget this is also the show's single greatest piece of world building. The Four Kingdoms didn't become the societies as we know them by accident. In order for each nation to master their bending style, it required them to adopt a certain way of thinking. The upbringing of the various nations' future generations is now a self-sustaining loop. Avatar is so great in part because the show itself is just one part of a history that is just as fleshed out as the present is. And this helps us understand how exactly we've arrived at the point which the show starts. Once this principle is explained, only then does it reveal itself as a self-evident truth. The traits assigned to the elements are philosophies rather than personalities, which thankfully keeps Avatar from Harry Potter syndrome. We come to find out that none of these nations have an inherent morality to them. And even beyond its role as a storytelling tool, this principle illustrates one of Avatar's biggest themes, that being the idea of balance. Tasked with mastering all four elements, Aang has to adopt and combine the mindsets behind them. This is a similar episode to The Guru, in which the division between nations and elements is described as a force preventing Aang from reaching enlightenment. The Avatar is somebody who brings balance to the world by embodying the sources of wisdom within one person, not just a child burdened with killing the Fire Lord. But even Zuko, a pure firebender, is taught that learning from the other bending styles is what will make him a complete person. The one who understood this better than anyone, without even being told, is Sokka. Sokka can't bend at all, and yet demonstrates the adaptability of the Water Tribe by serving as the social brain of the group, and took it upon himself to learn each kingdom's non-bending combat style. What lets him become the bona fide leader of the group is his accumulating knowledge from every corner of the world, that hunger for a robust reservoir of wisdom to draw upon. Toph doesn't do that, Katara doesn't do that, even Aang gains complete wisdom after Sokka does. Other shows can profess the importance of balance, but Avatar takes additional steps towards making it palatable through pop culture. Bitter Work's message of balance is only so successful because of its accessibility. Especially for the sake of children watching, it's easier to explain the way a firebender can learn from waterbenders than, hey kids, wanna learn some Taoism? Such a healthy, easily comprehensible way of teaching this is important, because, a lot of people need to hear it. I get there's a limited pool of lessons a well-rounded adult can take from cartoons, but it says more about somebody ragging on Avatar for being a kid's show when they haven't learned the messages it wants to teach. If you wanted to ignore all the ways Avatar implements and develops the idea of balance, Bitter Work's message is simply to consider other perspectives. Something many of us believe at a glance we do very well. But here's a thought exercise for you. Replace water, earth, fire, and air as sources of wisdom with logic, instinct, emotion, and ethics, and see if that changes your perspective on the message. Suddenly it becomes more complicated. How often do you see people who are over-emotional and make all decisions based on feelings? What about the impulsive whose first inclination is always the one they go with, only truly relying on their street smarts? Or perhaps somebody who claims logic is the sole pillar of wisdom, because, after all, facts don't care about your feelings. If you rely on only one corner of the square, sure, you may have wisdom in your own right, but one's intelligence can only grow by drawing knowledge from all of these sources. Without emotional intelligence, how are you supposed to maintain healthy relationships and act with empathy? Without instinct, how are you going to make something of yourself with any haste? and so on. Having a robust, balanced wisdom is generally considered a good thing, but only until the principles you're supposed to adopt disagree with your dominant corner. This is a very real application of the message behind bitter work. Its value comes from how little people accept the concept of balance despite acknowledging its benefits, from highlighting how similar we are to Zuko, running under the false idea that we can optimize our minds under the illusion of separation. But in case that's too cerebral, what about balance in choosing a life partner? Replace the elements with sexual, romantic, platonic, and committal love. How many relationships and marriages have fallen apart because of an imbalance in one of these corners? Or hell, let's get controversial and replace them with any 4 races or sexualities. Life experience offers endless opportunities to learn on your own, but there is much wisdom to harvest about the world from understanding the formative forces within different people, and how their perspective is intertwined with your own. Only then can we approach making the world a better place for everyone. Balance, completeness, robust wisdom. These aren't limited to philosophy, they can be applied to culture, behavior, politics, and this is what bitter work teaches. You could throw the guru in here too, but bitter work came first and is focused on individual balance. Even if the intended audience is children, the presentation of these themes is notably applicable to a mature adult life. When I watch Avatar, I see a story of growth, characters deciding who they want to be. This is the episode which I believe displays that the best, and imparts the most valuable lessons by which you may do it yourself. The sheer daunt of becoming a complete person when you could settle in a world that accepts and rewards incomplete wisdom is intimidating. But then again, that's why it's called bitter work.